Sometimes the darkest stories have the brightest endings, but first you have to walk through the shadows to find the light. Officer James Walker had seen a lot in his 15 years on the force, but nothing could have prepared him for what he discovered on that cold October night. As he sits in his patrol car now, tears streaming down his face, the weight of what he's learned about 8-year-old Sarah Johnson threatens to crush his very soul. But to understand why this hardened police veteran broke down, we need to go back to where it all began. The playground at Riverside Park had always been a peaceful place during Officer Walker's night patrols. The squeaking of empty swings in the wind and the occasional rustle of leaves were his only companions during those quiet hours. But for the past week, something had been different. Small things at first. A backpack hastily hidden behind the slide, fresh footprints in the morning dew, a half-eaten sandwich wrapped carefully in plastic. It was on his third night of noticing these oddities that he caught a glimpse of movement near the tube slide. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but whatever, or whoever, was there had already vanished. Walking closer, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. A small, worn teddy bear with one eye missing, propped carefully against the slide's entrance. "Hello?" he called out softly, keeping his voice gentle. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered him, but his instincts told him he wasn't alone. The next night, he came prepared. Instead of doing his regular patrol, he parked his car where it wouldn't be visible and waited. Hours passed, and just when he was about to give up, a small figure emerged from the shadows. His breath caught in his throat as he watched a young black girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old, carefully making her way across the playground. She carried a backpack that seemed too heavy for her small frame, and she moved with the cautious awareness of someone much older than her years. The girl climbed into the tube slide, her movements suggesting this was a well-practiced routine. Walker waited 30 minutes before approaching, his heart pounding with each step. When he shined his light into the slide, he found her curled up in a ball, using the backpack as a pillow, wrapped in what appeared to be an old curtain. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm Officer Walker. You can call me James." The girl's eyes snapped open, wide with fear. Before he could say another word, she bolted past him with surprising speed, disappearing into the darkness. Walker stood there, his hand still extended in greeting, as a horrible realization dawned on him. This child was sleeping in a playground, in October, alone. That night marked the beginning of what would become the most emotionally challenging case of his career. But he had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go, or how it would change not only his life, but the lives of countless others in their small community. For the next week, Walker tried everything he could think of to build trust with the mysterious girl. He'd leave sealed sandwiches, bottles of water, and even a new blanket near the slide. Each morning, he'd find the items gone, but the girl remained elusive. It wasn't until he left a new teddy bear, identical to the old one, but with both eyes intact, that things changed. That night, as he did his patrol, he heard a small voice behind him. "Thank you for the bear." He turned slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. There she stood, clutching both the old and new teddy bears to her chest. In the gentle glow of the park lights, he could see her more clearly now. Her clothes were clean but worn, her hair carefully braided, but with signs of coming undone. Most striking were her eyes, deep brown pools that held both wisdom and wariness far beyond her years. "You're welcome," he replied, maintaining his distance. "I'm James. Would you like to tell me your name?" She hesitated, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Sarah," she finally whispered. "Sarah Johnson." That name would later send shockwaves through the department. But at that moment, it was just the first thread of trust between a scared little girl and a police officer who couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to find her. "Sarah, can you tell me why you're sleeping here?" She clutched the bears tighter. "Because it's safer than home." Those 6 words would haunt Walker for years to come. They were also the key to unraveling a conspiracy that went far beyond one homeless child in a playground. What Sarah revealed over the next few hours made Walker's blood run cold. Her story began normally enough. She lived with her mother in an apartment complex on the other side of town. But things had changed dramatically 3 months ago when her mother's new boyfriend moved in. "Mom's different now," Sarah explained. her voice barely above a whisper. She doesn't see things anymore. Not since the needle started. Walker's jaw clenched. He'd seen this before. Drug abuse destroying families from the inside out. But there was something more here. Something that didn't quite add up. The men come at night, Sarah continued, her small hands trembling. They bring packages. Mom and Steve, the boyfriend, go into the bedroom. Sometimes other kids come with the men, but they never leave with them. Walker felt his professional demeanor cracking. The implications of what Sarah was describing pointed to something far darker than a simple drug abuse case. This sounded like human trafficking, with children involved. But before he could ask more questions, Sarah's eyes went wide with fear. Headlights swept across the playground as a black SUV drove slowly past. She bolted upright, terror evident in every movement. "That's them! They've been looking for me!" She tried to run, but Walker gently caught her arm. "Sarah, listen to me. I won't let anyone hurt you, but I need you to trust me. Will you trust me?" She looked at the SUV, then back at Walker, tears streaming down her face. "They said they'd hurt Mom if I ever told anyone." Walker made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Sarah, I promise you, we're going to help your mom too. But first, I need to get you somewhere safe." As he led her to his patrol car, neither of them noticed the dark figure watching from the shadows, phone in hand, making a call that would set in motion a chain of events that would shake their entire city to its core. The safe house was anything but safe. Walker had just settled Sarah into the department's designated witness protection location, a modest house in a quiet suburb, when all hell broke loose. The first warning was the power cutting out. The second was the sound of breaking glass from the back of the house. "Sarah, under the bed now!" Walker whispered urgently, drawing his weapon. The girl moved with practiced silence, disappearing into the darkness as heavy footsteps echoed through the house. What happened next would later be described in the official report as a coordinated assault by multiple armed suspects. But for Walker, it was 3 minutes of pure terror as he fought to protect an 8-year-old girl from men who would stop at nothing to silence her. The firefight was brief but intense. Walker took down 2 attackers before backup arrived, but not before taking a bullet to his shoulder. As he lay bleeding on the floor, his only thought was of Sarah. When he heard her scream from upstairs, something in him snapped. Ignoring the searing pain, he dragged himself up the stairs, leaving a trail of blood behind him. What he found in the bedroom would give him nightmares for years to come. Sarah was gone, and the window was wide open. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Walker," Captain Reynolds warned, his face grave. "This goes higher than you can imagine." It had been 48 hours since Sarah's kidnapping, and Walker was supposed to be in the hospital. Instead, he sat in Reynolds' office, arm in a sling, refusing to back down. "With all due respect, sir, I don't care how high it goes. She trusted me." The investigation that followed exposed a web of corruption that stretched from street-level drug dealers all the way to City Hall. Sarah's mother's boyfriend, Steve Martinez, wasn't just any drug dealer. He was the key middleman in a trafficking operation that used addicted parents as cover for moving children across state lines. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Sarah's mother, Angela Johnson. Walker found her in a rehab facility where she'd been hiding since Sarah's disappearance. She was 3 days clean and terrified. "They said they'd help me get back on my feet," Angela sobbed, her hands shaking. "Steve promised it was just about moving packages. But then I saw the children. When I threatened to go to the police, they got me hooked on heroin, said they'd take Sarah if I ever tried to leave." Her next words made Walker's blood run cold. "The deputy mayor's brother runs the whole thing. They have a warehouse by the river. That's where they take the kids before moving them out of state." The warehouse operation was supposed to be by the book. Tactical teams, FBI support, everything done properly. But when Walker heard Sarah's scream from inside the building, protocol went out the window. He was first through the door, despite orders to stay back due to his injury. What followed was chaos. Gunfire, shouting, the sound of running feet. But Walker was focused on only one thing: following that scream. He found Sarah locked in a shipping container with 6 other children, all of them destined for transport. The sight of those young faces, filled with fear and hope, would stay with him forever. But it was what happened next that broke him. As he helped Sarah out of the container, she threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "I knew you'd come, Dad." That single word, Dad, hit him harder than any bullet ever could. 3 months later, Walker stood in a courtroom, watching as the verdicts were read. The trafficking ring was dismantled, with arrests reaching all the way to the deputy mayor. Angela Johnson, after completing rehab, was working with a survivors advocacy group, helping other parents escape similar situations. But the real victory came in a different courtroom, on a quiet Thursday morning, when Walker officially adopted Sarah. The journey wasn't over. Sarah still had nightmares, and the trauma would take years to process. But now she had something she'd never had before. A real home, a father who would move heaven and earth to protect her, and a future full of possibility. Today, 5 years later, Officer James Walker still patrols the same playground where he first found Sarah. But now he's not alone. He's accompanied by his daughter, who insisted on creating a program to help other homeless and at-risk children. Every night, they leave care packages by the slide. Food, blankets, and a teddy bear, along with a note that reads, "You are not alone. Help is here when you're ready." And sometimes on quiet nights, Walker still finds himself wiping away tears. Not from sadness anymore, but from profound gratitude for the little girl who taught him that sometimes the biggest acts of heroism start with simply noticing a shadow in the night. As for Sarah, she's thriving in middle school now. Dreams of becoming a police officer herself one day. But every night before bed, she still keeps 2 teddy bears on her shelf. One old and missing an eye, one new and perfect. Reminders of the night her life changed forever. "You know, Dad," she said recently, "I used to think that monsters were real and heroes weren't. You proved me wrong about both." Walker hugged her tight, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the battles we fight, but from the love we choose to give when it matters most. The playground at Riverside Park isn't just a place of shadows anymore. It's become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, there's always someone watching, ready to help, ready to care. And somewhere in the city, another child might be hiding, another story waiting to be told. But thanks to Officer Walker and Sarah, they won't have to face the darkness alone. Because sometimes the most important thing a person can do is simply stop, look closer, and care enough to make a difference. That's what changed everything for Sarah Johnson. That's what turns an ordinary police officer into a hero. That's what transforms a playground from a place of fear into a beacon of hope. And that's why every single night, Officer James Walker still patrols these streets, looking for shadows that might just be someone's child, waiting to be saved. Because he knows now, better than anyone, that sometimes the biggest hearts are found in the smallest people, and the greatest love stories aren't about romance at all. They're about the moment when two broken souls find each other and decide to become whole together.